podcast where we take a quick break from the chaos to give you straight talk, sharp insights, and make sense of what's happening around us. Maria?
Yes, welcome everyone. We're here to cut through the noise, whether it's in Nevada, across the U.S., or around the world. And most importantly, there's no fluff.
Annette Magnus.
And I'm your co-host, Maria Teresa, or Maite for short. But if you can't pronounce it, Maria is fine. Just don't call me Marie.
And today we are thrilled to welcome a true Nevada legend and journalism icon, Steve Sebelius, for an in-depth discussion on Nevada's political landscape as we start the Nevada legislative session, which is starting this week. So, Steve, welcome to our show. You were on our previous show. Now you're on this show. You're our first guest. We're so excited to have you.
Here, I'm glad I'm your first guest. That's excellent.
I mean, we adore you. Who else would we pick? All right, let's talk about the NVLEG. So the legislature starts today or this week. I was here in Carson City for it. You obviously did not make it up today because of the weather. Lots of people didn't make it up. It's going to be an interesting session. There's a lot going on at the federal level. We heard that in Speaker Yeager's speech today. There's a lot going on that could impact the state of Nevada. And then we've got a governor who's having some challenges balancing the budget and getting the numbers right. We don't have enough money for things. What do you think are going to be some of the key themes this session, Steve?
Yeah, well, as usual, there are so many things that the Nevada legislature has to deal with that are completely outside of its control. And what President Trump is doing on the national level is definitely one of those things. He has apparently forestalled his tariffs for a month's time, so that will help. But you saw almost immediately the fact that prices were going to increase as a result of that. This is something I asked President Trump about when I interviewed him. I told him tariffs are not paid by China. They're not paid by Mexico. They're not paid by Canada. They're paid by companies that import goods from those places. And then those costs are passed directly on to consumers. So let's do something that we all love. Let's talk about, which is made with avocados, most of which are imported from Mexico. So for those of you who have enjoyed going to Lindo and having make the guacamole right there at the side of your table, it is really good. I can't get them to make it spicy enough though, no matter what I do, but that's a side issue. That's going to cost more. It's going to cost more when you go to Chipotle, if that's your thing. And the consumers are going to bear those prices. Now, Trump himself has acknowledged, well, there may be some pain. There will be pain, and it won't be felt by Trump. It won't be felt by many of the associates that he has there at the White House. It'll be felt by real people. And so I'm sure that's something that the legislature wants to deal with. You have the general economy, you have inflation, you have the effect that tariffs might have on building materials. We want to get more affordable housing here. Those things are all going to be impacted by just these tariffs. And that's just one policy on the national level. On the state level, you still have, today we were heard all about bipartisanship, working together. That's what they always say. And at least in the 10 sessions that I have covered, that's always what they say on the first day. That usually doesn't last much beyond the first week, but we'll see about that. I think there are some things that could be done quickly that could build some momentum on which the Republicans and Democrats appear to agree mostly, but that list is not very long. It's not going to last very long. So there's a lot of factors, most of which are outside the control of lawmakers here that they're going to have to deal with in the next 4 months.
Thank you for that, Steve. First off, thank you for explaining tariffs and that China and Mexico don't just cut Trump a check for that. I had no idea that's how tariffs worked. That's how Twitter has been saying, is they're going to cut us a check. What my question is, I have many, but I will stick to what is it that people can look forward to in NVLEG that you think is going to be different than other sessions? I think it's, we have the split government. We have a building that's still not built. Now we have a bigger building, or we have a new building in Vegas, like whether it's political or functional, what is it that's new about this session?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of things that are similar. We had the same kind of divided government last time. That is going to force Republicans and Democrats to come together and compromise on at least some of what they want to do. And that's not a bad thing necessarily. I think there's bills. I look at the bill that would ban firearms in polling places where they're not already banned. So for now, if a polling place is in a school, you can't bring a gun into a school, and so it's banned there already. But it's not banned at the mall. It's not banned in some of the parking lots outside the grocery store. And I think last time that bill contained some language is now unnecessary thanks to a Supreme Court decision. So if a clean bill came to the governor that said no firearms in polling places, I think that there is a good chance a governor would sign that bill if it was a clean bill. The question is, will Democrats want to do that? Will they want to give a clean bill? There are Democrats in the legislature right now who I know are planning bills specifically so they can say the governor vetoed this when he's running for re-election. Those message kind of bills, which I think are a horrible waste of the legislature's time, because you two well know what it takes to get a bill all the way through the session. It is not easy. The system, as the great Jeff Dornan once told me, is not designed to pass bills, it's designed to kill bills. And so, pushing a bill through that the governor is going to veto seems to me to be a terrible waste of time and really almost malpractice on the part of the legislature. I don't care how deeply you believe in something. If you know the governor is going to veto it, you have to find another way. You have to do something different if your goal is to be effective. Otherwise, if your goal is to, do political theater, as the governor sometimes calls it, well, I suppose you could do that, but it's a disservice to your constituents when you do that. And I would hope that wouldn't happen, but I know that is going to happen at this point. This is the first session. I was remarking to someone today, this is the first session that I have not attended the opening day of the session, not for want of trying, but the weather was not conducive to it. And it reminded me, the Constitution specifies that the legislature has to meet in Carson City and conduct its business in Carson City. But that is a feature of the Constitution that could easily change. In fact, I found just 4 sections of the Constitution that, if they were edited slightly, would allow the legislature to meet anywhere in the state of Nevada, including down in Las Vegas, where the majority of people live, where the majority of lawmakers are from, and where there's really no problem flying in and out, at least is what I saw during my many hours spent in the airport recently. So that might be something that lawmakers want to look into. I doubt that they will, and that would be a difficult thing to do it. And I want to make clear, I'm not talking about changing the capital or saying that Carson City is no longer the seat of government. It would still be the seat of government, but the legislature could meet and should be able to meet outside Carson City, not just for hearings, not just teleconferencing, but meet as a body in places other than Carson City. And so when you have inclement weather in that place, you could meet down here, and more people could attend anyway. And so that's something that they may want to consider. I don't think they will.
Well, we can dare to dream, because that would be fabulous. And, me sitting in Carson City right now, that would be great, because I could do it from my home.
So could
yeah, right. My question for you is about 2026, because I think a lot of what happens this session has to be looked at in the context of 2026. Last session, sure, we had a competitive presidential election, and some of the legislators were going into a competitive cycle. But this time we have a lot of legislators who are getting ready to run for other things. And that was kind of the vibe in the building today. It was just different in there. You have a majority leader who might want to run for attorney general. You have a speaker who might want to run for county commission. You have a governor who's going to run again, other constitutional offices that might be open. So talk to our viewers and our listeners about how 2026 is going to play into this and how much it may affect what does or does not get done this cycle or this session.
Yeah, I kind of alluded to that previously, but I think that will be a shadow that hangs over everything. Democrats don't want Joe Lombardo to have a second term. And I've got bad news for them. Joe Lombardo is well on his way to winning a second term. He has made very few mistakes, and we can talk about the budget issue more if you want. But he has made very few mistakes in his term as governor. Now, he vetoed 75 bills, and it's not a record to be proud of. And frankly, the governor isn't proud of that record. He looks at that as a failure of the system, and he's right. It was a failure of the system, it was a failure of Republicans and Democrats to come together and pass durable legislation that maybe was not what everybody wanted, but it was at least some of what both sides wanted to get done. And there were other vetoes that he issued that I think were unnecessary. The bill, for example, prohibiting hate guns to people who have been convicted of hate crimes. I think that's a perfectly reasonable bill. The bill that would criminalize signing false electoral college certificates, I think that was a very reasonable bill. The people who did so are still under indictment and are still facing charges up there in Carson City. And so, but the 2026 election hangs over all of this. And whether Lombardo will have a good session, he'll have things that he can brag about going forward, whether Senate Majority Leader can position herself to run for Attorney General, where Aaron Ford is term limited and he is intending to run for governor, whether Speaker Steve Yeager wants to continue in the legislature or run for a seat on the county commission. When you have your eye on these other seats, you tend to not focus as much on what you're doing at that moment. And so I think that's going to hang over a lot of this. There are other lawmakers who are coming up on term limits, whether or not this session, maybe in a couple of years. And so they are very mindful of that if they want to continue to be in public service. I've always thought the term limits were not a good idea for the legislature. For every lawmaker that we get rid of, and term limits didn't get rid of them, but for every Mark Menendo, for example, we lose a Maggie Carlton. And that's not a fair trade as far as I'm concerned. Maggie Carlton, the former state senator, former assemblywoman, former chair of Ways and Means, was state treasurer. I don't know if she would want to have run for re-election, but if she did, she sure would have gotten to the bottom of this budget situation, I think. So I've always thought that, term limits that force people to seek public office if they want to do so elsewhere, not a good idea. But much like moving the ability of the legislature to meet elsewhere, I don't think that's really going to come up on the agenda to change. If I had my druthers, I would get rid of the 2/3 limitation on raising taxes. I would get rid of term limits. And believe it or not, I would get rid of the lobbyist gift ban, which I think is far too draconian and hinders, I think, the legislative process. And this is, obviously an insider viewpoint. But in my 20 years of covering the legislature, that's just what I see as a problem.
Yeah. And for those who are watching or listening who don't understand what Steve might be talking about, there's a ban, basically. I'm a lobbyist, technically. I can't buy anything for a legislator. I can't take them for a cup of coffee because that somehow will be misconstrued as a bribe, and I have to report that. A cup of coffee in this town is not going to be a bribe to anyone. And so you have to be very transparent and clear with that stuff, which is good. Transparency is important, but it really prohibits lobbyists from being able to do business in Carson City and be able to actually have meetings or conversations with legislators and lawmakers outside of the legislative building. So it hinders our ability to do our jobs. In addition to that, I think it's interesting you bring up Assemblywoman Carlton. I was just having dinner with her tonight. She is a treasure and she is a wealth of knowledge. She has taught me so much. But losing her in the legislature, for those who don't know, you lost a lot of information. You lost a lot of history. You lost a lot of historical context. She remembers sessions back to 1999. So I know there are some arguments out there for listeners and viewers. Oh, term limits are good. And in some ways they are. They provide new, fresh blood for the legislature. But you also then empower the lobbyists to have all of the institutional knowledge and kind of run the building then. And you don't always want the lobbyist running the building. I am 40 years old. I should not have more institutional knowledge than sitting legislators. And I do, because I've been there since I was 19. So just to explain some context behind what Steve's saying and give it a little color as to why he's saying those things, because it's true. So Maria, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, and so 2 questions, and they're both budget related, Steve. If I'm a noob and I have no idea what you just meant by Ways and Means, what is that? And then I have another question.
Yeah, I'll do very quickly to explain that. There's 2 committees that deal primarily with the budget, and that's the Senate Finance Committee and the Assembly Ways and Means Committee. And those committees essentially throughout the entire session take apart the budget, look at each part of the budget, then put it back together, approving or disapproving based on the predictions of the Economic Forum as to what the economy is going to look like in 2 years. It's a flawed system, to be sure, but so is the only meeting every other year for 4 months as a flawed system. And so those are the committees that essentially oversee the budget. I will tell you, those are the most important committees in the legislature. All of the other committees, you will get some really great hearings in growth and infrastructure, leg ops and elections and education. But none of it means anything because the budget is the true representation of the priorities of any organization. And so if you want to know what the state of Nevada's priorities are, don't listen to what people say. Look at what the budget is. And once you see that, you'll realize where everything goes. That is where the real story is. Again, something taught to me by the great Jeff Dornan, who was a maven on the budget and understood far more than I will ever understand about it. But those are essentially the two committees that oversee the state's spending, not just the $12.7 billion general fund for the next 2 years, but the entire budget, which is much bigger than that when you count federal funds, assuming we are still going to get federal funds after President Trump and DOGE gets done with Washington.
What a nightmare.
DOGE. And my follow-up question then is, so they're going to be working on this budget, and the governor's office usually presents their proposal of a budget. They review it throughout the session, and then towards the end, actually close the budget. And what's the deal with the budget? What's the news? Is it a good budget? Is it a terrible budget? Does it need fixing? Is it missing some things? Does it add up?
Yeah,
what do you think, Steve?
It definitely needs fixing. To a certain extent, almost every governor's budget requires fixing. This budget, though, in particular, came over, and there was a $335 million structural deficit in the budget. There were budget allocations made that were not permissible under law, and that has since been whittled down to about $80 million. That is still a gap in that budget. We're going to hear more, I believe, on Wednesday at a joint meeting of the Senate Finance and Assembly Ways and Means Committee. The committee meets in the morning, but according to a note on the agenda, around 5 o'clock on Wednesday, the governor's finance office will come over and explain what they have done to fix the broken budget that was sent over. Typically, you do not see a budget gap, much less a budget gap of $335 million. Now, in light of the entire general fund, it's a small percentage, but it's still a significant amount of money. The budgets have been thrown into chaos by losing an amount that's not even a quarter of what we're talking about. So it's a serious thing. Now, the Constitution, the state law does require the budget to be when the governor sends it over. And so it appears that was not done. But the real requirement is to pass a balanced budget. That falls on the legislature. And that requirement won't come into play until the end of the session, when all of the 5 bills that comprise the state budget are passed. And so there's a long way to go between then and now. And the problems that we've seen, I think will be fixed by that time. Interestingly, there are some things that were not included in the governor's budget that lawmakers might want to include. And if they do, they're going to have to find even more money. So not only would dig out of the hole that exists now, but, get even more revenue somehow or make other cuts. I'm talking specifically about the tax credit bill that would attempt to lure a film studio to set up shop here in Nevada. That's a very expensive bill with a return that could help diversify the economy, or it could not. And so the state has to determine whether or not that's something it wants to do. Right now, the governor's a no on that, and you can tell because his budget did not include it. And so we will see where the legislature comes down on that. That's one of the many issues they're going to have to discuss specific to the budget.
So, Steve, just to wrap your section up, because I want to be respectful of your time.
I can go longer.
We know. What do you think the biggest issues are going to be this session? So you already talked film tax credit. We talked budget. We talked the federal government and how that's kind of coming into play. But Speaker Yeager talked today about a bill that I'm actually working on to address the aid crisis. I think there's got to be a lot of those types of bills to deal with some of the very real issues we're experiencing in the state of Nevada. But obviously, they're probably going to work on education. They're going to work on, some leave bills, childcare. Like, there's so many issues facing Nevadans right now. What do you think those big topics of conversation are going to be?
Yeah, I think with respect to education, I think that is a very pressing issue. And when we speak of education, we're speaking primarily of the Clark County School District, the fifth largest district in the country, and it's a $2 billion plus organization, and it has just been bereft, just vexed with problems year after year after year. Certainly since I've been here, and probably even before that, things have to change about that. And what's frustrating about the school system is we'll pass a new funding plan and see if anything changes. It does not. They'll pass a new assessment of schools and see if anything changes. It does not. They'll talk about different kinds of national standardized tests. They'll talk about read by three. They'll talk about all these things and funding for all these things. But while they are doing that, while they're tinkering with all these things, generations of kids are going through who will graduate and will be unable to get a job, will be unable to become as productive a member of society as they otherwise would have been if the state fulfilled its most basic obligation to these students. It is a shocking crisis. And I don't think it can be stressed, the urgency of this problem can be stressed enough. The governor said 2 years ago that if he didn't see improvement, he'd be back recommending changes in leadership to education. I think that time has come. And I think his bill will offer more of that. The trouble is we have laws that constitute the school board, and the school board is one of the major problems in dealing with education. And the school district's priorities are completely out of whack. They talk about student achievement. They talk about, we want to do better on that. But their priorities, Annette, as you'll recall, in the last session, there was a bill to appoint 4 members appointed by local governments who were non-voting members.
I think it's one of the best bills they've ever done.
And the non-voting version was a compromise bill. The school district fought that bill as if it was a bill that would have banned education in Nevada.
They told me it was a bill to overthrow JARA. I was like, well, that sounds great. Let's do it.
Absolutely. And JARA, Jesus JARA, the former superintendent, is now gone. That was a good thing. His maladministration of that district will not be looked at kindly by history. But the members themselves, even though we just elected a few new members, some of them are completely ill-equipped to run an organization of this size, and it's patently obvious. And I just don't think people act with enough urgency on this, and they're too willing to accept the status quo. And so if I see lawmakers who are impatient and even angry about this, that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned, because you can't look at this as a citizen. And I don't have children in the district. I don't have children at all. But
None of us do, but we all pay attention to it.
And I can see the impact that this has on all of us. We are all going to be retirees, me much sooner than the two of you. But nonetheless, we are handing our next generation responsibilities that they are not prepared for because we have failed to prepare them. And I think that's the most exigent, urgent, and existential crisis the state has. So that's one big issue. Education is one big issue. A few others, just real quickly. You have homelessness. There are some people who are treating this problem with the comprehensive view that it needs to be treated with, because not all people are homeless for the same reason. Some are homeless because of mental illness, some because of drug addiction, some because they lost their job and they would be working if they could, but they just can't find that job. All of those individual things need to be assessed and brought to bear as you deal with that homeless crisis. One jurisdiction, the city of Las Vegas, bears the brunt of this because that's where the services are located within the city of Las Vegas. And I think they're tired of having to deal with that. But that's just the way things are geographically, and they're going to have to be the lead agency, I think, when it comes to dealing with this. But that doesn't mean the other agencies can't come. A related problem is affordable housing. The governor has said we need more land for affordable housing. That's well and good. We probably do. We probably could use that land. But really, let's be realistic. If you want affordable housing, workforce housing, housing for people who are working people who need it close to work, that's going to be in infill areas. It's not going to be out in Summerlin. It's not going to be out in Henderson. It's not going to be, McDonald Highlands or anything else. It's going to be infill projects. And how much federal land is there? That requires other, I think, approaches beyond just the land. The land is a good start, but, let's come together with some ideas and get that going, because there are people, I work with them all the time, who despair of ever owning a house. Young people who think that they will never be able to own a house, start a family. And having moved here, I came here in 1993, and a house could be had for $100,000. That's not the case anymore. It's like $473,000, I think, is the median home price. So, people have no hope that they'll ever not be a renter. And the rental market is not easy on that. One final one, and I always mention this, again, I don't have children, but for people who do, affordable childcare, affordable, safe, good childcare. Ideally, it would be at one's work site, but I have had friends who've had young children, and the amount of money that they spend for childcare is unbelievable. One person who worked for me when I was an editor at the Review Journal, he and his wife together spent more on childcare every month than I spent on my mortgage for my house. It was unbelievable. It was a shocking insight.
So one of my clients, Steve, is Moms Rising, and we work on affordable childcare, and we're going to be working on that this session. We did a study that showed that the price of childcare in Nevada is more expensive than a year of college at UNLV. So people are paying more to send their kids to childcare than they are to send their kids to college in this state.
Yeah, and it is absolutely necessary, because we do not live in a society where dad can go to work and mom can stay home like in the 90s. That's not something that a lot of women even want to do, even if they could afford to do it. And as long as we have that kind of an economy, we need to make it so that people can participate in that kind of economy and not have to make a trade-off and a choice that they're going to cut their income in half because they have to be able to have childcare if they both work. And so that's just not something that's viable. And I really hope that the legislature takes that on. There's a whole bunch of other issues, I'm sure, that are going to come up but those are essentially the biggest ones. There is a looming one, and again, I'm touching all the hot button issues that people really don't want to talk about tonight, and that is these property tax abatements that we have. I think even people who are conservative, even people who are Republicans, I know because I've talked to them, now understand that these abatements, which were great when the economy was booming and home prices were soaring, and were necessary maybe at that point, now have held down the growth of local government revenue to the point where services are almost impossible to provide. And to any brave soul that touches that issue, I wish them luck, because that's going to be tough. Because people do not want their property tax to go up. There was a property tax measure in Henderson. One was to raise money for firefighters, and one was to raise money for libraries. I voted for them both because I believe in fighting fires, and I believe very, very deeply and passionately in the mission of the public library. They went down, I think the libraries went down 2-1, and the firefighters a little bit less than that.
That feels right.
And so people don't want their property tax raised. So if you come to them and say, we're not going to raise your property tax, we're simply going to tinker with the abatement, but you're going to pay more, and you should pay more because you're getting services that, you rely on, and the cost of those services is outpacing the local government's ability to pay. We still have not gotten back to where we were in 2005 before the Great Recession. And so I don't see anybody doing that. I certainly don't see the governor, who's very proud of his no tax budget, approving that. But that is something that needs to be discussed. There's no question about that. And so I hear it kind of whispered on the side occasionally, but nobody has addressed that issue in the main. And one final one I just thought of, this is a completely personal one for me, and that is that the Nevada League of Cities and Municipalities has brought a bill that would allow local governments to charge for the staff time in retrieving and turning over copies of public records. This is a terrible bill, and I, of course, as a reporter, don't take positions on bills, but I can take a position on this bill, and that is it's a terrible bill and it must be killed as rapidly as possible, because it doesn't just affect those of us in the media, although it affects us primarily. It affects any person, whether a lobbyist, whether just a regular citizen who wants to get public records from government agencies, which are reluctant and very devious at times about how they conceal these things from the public on a good day. Giving them the ability to charge for this would be an outrageous abdication of our public records law. And that bill should most definitely be on. Every good lobbyist should be trying to kill that bill as quickly as humanly possible. So, Annette, when you see that come up, please do your best to kill that.
Got it. Well, thank you, Steve, for being here. As always, we love having you on all of our things. And so we will hopefully have you back during session as we get maybe midway through, so you can kind of explain what's going on and talk about some of the hot topics. So will you come back and join us?
I absolutely will. If Southwest is kind enough to be able to learn to land in the wind, I would be more than happy to be there in person. But if not, we'll do it virtually.
Sounds great. Steve, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for being here. Yeah, we're not going to blame DEI for this. This is not their fault. It's not DEI's fault. I'm not Elon Musk. So I appreciate you, Steve, and all you do. And yeah, any final thoughts before we let you go?
No, I just think it's day one, and there's 119 days to go. The comedy of day one usually fades by noon on day two, but I think this time it may last a little bit longer. There's a lot of new people who don't realize some of the pitfalls that are going to happen, and they will have lobbyists like you, Annette, up there to help educate them as to how the many ways a bill can die, and some of their bills will experience that pretty soon.
Very quickly. All right, Steve, thank you for joining us. Thanks for doing this with us. And thanks to all our viewers for tuning in to listen to Steve. We're going to let him hop off and keep going with our podcast. So, Steve, thanks for joining us.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, Maria. So I was in the building first day. I was in the building for, the opening ceremonies. Obviously, we're in the first week, so things are kind of, still hopping, like Steve said. We're kind of getting into the thick of things. So while we're in the recess rundown and the local lowdown, really talking about the Nevada Legislature and talking about local stuff, he got into a lot of that. But what are some of the things that are standing out for you, Maria, as someone who now gets to watch the legislature for fun, not somebody who has to work at the legislature? What are you thinking and what are you seeing?
One, I am fascinated by, and this is actually why we started this podcast, to hopefully get to people. I am fascinated by how unaware on a day-to-day basis I am about the legislature if I don't actively go searching for the news for it. Because we have Steve and we have others, but there's just not enough noise around it from like regular people. And if you are a regular person who watches it and tweets about it, you're more of an activist. Thank you so much. But I mean like regular people that just aren't dealing with it. And so this is the first time experiencing it where I'm like not inundated with Nellis alerts and checking the calendar every day. So I kind of have been able to be wearing the shoes of, when we were at our old job, we would talk a lot about how do we make sure regular people see this bit of news or hear about this piece of legislation. And that is something that I really am experiencing firsthand, because we always talked about how we don't think regular people really pay attention to this. And I'm someone that cares about this stuff and politics, but like, I didn't see it. And so that is something that hopefully, we won't be able to get every single Nevadan. Obviously, that would be amazing to, listen or watch this podcast. But that's kind of why we started it, to break things down. And if you're not like in the building and actually working on this and you don't get the Nevada Independent newsletter and things like that, where they really break everything down, so that you can get the information that's out there, because that's kind of been jarring that, I usually would have been able to answer my own questions and your questions, but not this time around. This time around, I'm like feel like I'm walking in fog, and I'm like, I have no idea what's going on.
I think the only information you were getting today was me texting you the updates, the live updates as they were happening in the building. So, well, and it was funny today, speaking of being in the building, as the opening ceremony, you all will hear this on Wednesday, but as the opening ceremony was happening today on Monday, we experienced a 5-minute recess, hence the name 1 minute recess. We experienced a 5-minute recess on the floor. And Speaker Yeager kind of chuckled. And he's like, yeah, it's a 5-minute recess, but legislative time, which means it was more like an hour. So just wanted to remind people of why we named this podcast what we did, because, it never quite is what it seems. So excited to have that happen on the very first day and remind us of why we picked the name we did.
We went not even a day with a recess and a joke about it.
Exactly. So, and we'll bring you some clips from the legislature as it's happening, when good things are happening, when bad things are happening, when I'm hearing things in the building. We'll pull some clips for some of our upcoming episodes so that this way you don't have to watch all day, because that's why I'm here in the Carson City, but you at least get the highlights of what's going on in the legislative building and what's happening in Carson City. All right, Maria. So I think that's enough about the NVLEG. There's a lot going on nationally. So you want to switch it up for us?
Yeah. So WTF is happening outside of that in the world. And and that's what I kind of get to work in every day, is the world. And it is wild out there. Sometimes I just want to go into the woods and never come back. And it's one of those days. So now we're pausing the, I was going to say it in Spanish, aranceles, but the imports. Now you know what tariffs is in Spanish. It's aranceles. You've probably heard the president of Mexico say that a lot today. They
definitely haven't heard Donald Trump say that, because he can barely speak English. But
yeah, that's right. And so it's been a fascinating day. First it was Mexico that got it paused, and we can talk a lot about how that wasn't Donald Trump's victory. It was Mexico's victory, even though Trump world is trying to shape it that way. And then Canada also got
Trump's
paused.
Failure. Because
Literally.
even, when I see Rand Paul, and I agree with Rand Paul tweeting something on Twitter where he said a tariff is a tax and we are taxing Americans. And he said that over the weekend. And I was like, when I agree with Rand Paul about something, we have officially jumped the shark, because it was a tax on us. We were the ones, the Americans are the ones who are going to pay the price on all of this.
Yeah. For the people in the back and the people that don't still understand, they do not cut us a check. It's not the government actually saying, okay, a tuna can, let's pretend this tuna is from another country. It's not like wherever that country is, this tuna is from. It's not like they take it from this company and say, okay, we will import it for you. No, it's this company doing the movement of this tuna, and they're the ones that are going to have to pay that tax. But companies usually, let's remember, companies always seek to better their bottom line. They're going to pass that tax on to the consumer, to us. That's why your guacamole and your avocado toast would have been more expensive.
So I was busy all weekend. I really, really did my best, because I was doing some work on my mental health this weekend. I was trying to not pay attention to the news, but he puts a tariff on Mexico. Donald Trump does. He puts a tariff on Canada and a tariff on China, which is where we get the majority of our imports. He then says, he makes all these campaign promises that, prices on eggs are going to go down. That's why people apparently voted for him. I don't get it, but whatever. Talk to me, Maria, about why those campaign promises were such a farce and how tariffs are not going to bring down the price of things.
Because it was a show. And when are people going to understand Donald Trump is a showman? He's not a president. He's not even a businessman, because he's bad at it. And this isn't anything on Republicans. You have Republican friends. I have Republican friends. If he would have been a logical, sane Republican that you just disagree on, things would be fine. We would disagree on those things and we would push him on those things. But all of that was a farce. It was all for show. And you really got to see it when today in the morning, the president of Mexico called his bluff and went to the negotiating table. And then he basically said, all right, we're going to pause it for 30 days. We'll see what happens 30 days from now. And then Canada did the same thing. And now all of a sudden, those tariffs aren't happening either. So it was all for show to get your votes if you voted for him. And that's what we need to realize, that he is someone that does things for show. And he is big on the blustering and things like that. And the tariffs, if they would have gone through, or if we get anything that goes through, it is going to raise prices. And not only are they going to raise prices because on the stuff that is actually happening, which is all the raids on immigration, you also have less employees of things like farms and ranches and vegetable picking and fruit picking. So if you have that, couple that, right, we have less workers, and I'm sorry, but American workers are not taking up those jobs because they would have taken them by now. And you have a tariff that is going to make both products, homegrown and from another country, more expensive. So that means everything you buy basically at Albertsons or wherever you shop for your groceries, Trader Joe's, is going to be more expensive. Because companies, in order to survive, need to make sure their bottom line is secured. And then the way they're going to secure it is to raise your price at the counter of wherever you're getting your food. And by the way, if you check the egg prices, they haven't been lowered yet. So where is my lower egg prices? It's not happening.
I just want to brag for a minute because I'm super excited about this. Many people don't know that I am working for the Retail Association this session. It's got to blow some people's minds, me saying that, because I really wanted to learn more about business. And I'm really excited to be working with them this session to work on some really important policies. And one of the policies that I've had the privilege to work on over the past few weeks is working on a bill to get more eggs into the state of Nevada. Assemblyman Howard Watts had a bill in 2021 that made it so cage-free eggs were the preferred eggs that we had in Nevada. And that's great. That's fantastic. But the problem is when there's an egg shortage and when avian flu is raging, it's really hard to get eggs into Nevada that are cage-free. And so we worked with Assemblyman Watts and the Department of Agriculture in Nevada to start moving forward a bill that's an emergency measure that'll be heard in the first 2 weeks of legislative session this year to actually address the egg crisis, get more eggs into the state of Nevada, and hopefully bring those prices down. That's the whole point, is to bring the price of eggs down for average Nevadans who need access to affordable eggs. Donald Trump is not doing anything on this. That is the biggest joke that was told to people during this election, is he's going to bring down the price of groceries. He's going to bring down the price of eggs. What's actually happening is the state legislature is leading on this. Democrats are leading on this. Groups like the Retail Association are leading on this issue and working with Democrats and Republicans in the state of Nevada to fix this issue. And so I think it's really important for Nevadans to realize, and Americans to realize, in these situations, oftentimes we have to rely on our state governments now because our federal government is such a mess. And Donald Trump and Elon Musk and all their cronies are just making such a mess of it. But whether it's the federal grants or whether it's, Elon Musk stealing our social security numbers this week or whatever it is. And it's going to take strong state governments to actually step in and do some of this work now. And so I'm hopeful that the state legislature will pass that bill and we're going to be able to get something through session. And I'm really proud to be working on that bill this session.
That's amazing. And I'm sorry, was the sponsor Donald Trump or J.D. Vance or Elon Musk?
No, it was Assemblyman Howard Watts and Assemblyman Speaker Yeager and Senate Majority Leader Cannon. Those will be the sponsors. Nobody at the federal level, of course.
None of those sound like a Doge employee.
Nope. Nobody's fixing your eggs at the federal government level, friends.
It's the state level. Yeah, you mentioned Elon Musk. One of the things that also has been popping a lot is apparently Elon Musk is the other branch of government now. He is...
I can't roll my eyes hard enough on this because every time I sadly have to log into Twitter or X or whatever the hell we're calling it these days, I want to gouge my eyes out because it's I don't know. Continue. Sorry.
horrific because...
Yeah, I don't even have words at this point in not saying something.
And it's interesting. I work and live with a lot of people that have been through actual coups, right? Like military coup, oppositional coup. Maybe the U.S. helped those coups, but that's for another episode. But today at work, that's one thing that we all talked about, and I've talked about it with my mom who lived through one. What Elon Musk did is a coup. When
100%.
you literally bar people from doing their jobs in the government, that's a coup.
And then you block members of Congress from going into the building to see what's going on with those employees.
And what drives me absolutely fucking nuts is that this motherfucker, Elmo, sorry, Elmo, but I don't even want to say his name, says, and Marco Rubio and all of these people are saying, it's all because USAID needs to be more transparent. I'm sorry, you're trying to be more transparent by being blatantly untransparent, by not letting people into the office to see what the F you are doing? No. Methinks you're there gathering stuff for Vladimir Putin. That's my hot take.
I went into the legislative building and I came out and there was a whole bunch that happened because I'm kind of the opposite of you now, right? Like when you're in the legislature, you're solely focused on the state and you don't really have to focus on the federal government. It's actually kind of delightful. But I came out and Nick, my husband, was like, so they blocked members of Congress from going in the building, and Elon's like stealing our social security numbers and our bank information probably. And like his college student employees are the ones in there getting him. In what world, Maria, is this a real thing? How are we here?
2025, in the world where people decided it was okay to give Trump a second chance.
A second chance where he's technically a lame duck and has zero guardrails because the Republicans control basically every branch of government. There's no guardrails now. And what's so crazy to me is, and, everybody wanted to say, oh, well, he didn't even read Project 2025. He didn't have anything to do with the Heritage Foundation. It's no big deal. Bullshit. He is literally going word by word, line by line through Project 2025. And if you have not looked up Project 2025 yet, and you don't know what we're talking about still to this day, I encourage you highly to Google it. Just Google Project 2025, look at what they're doing, and realize they are literally doing every step every single day. Every single day. And here's the other thing that I wanted to ask you about. This shock and awe approach where you're simultaneously doing so much to unravel democracy, to unravel the federal government. And I think it's going to be lasting damage that we may not be able to undo. So literally burning our systems to the ground. On top of it, doing these things that are so dangerous and smack of authoritarianism. Talk to me about your thoughts on that, especially with the Queen, your mom, having lived through what she lived through, seeing this in other countries. Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, we could do a whole podcast episode on that. On this is really going to test the U.S. population. And by population, I don't mean just people who didn't vote for Trump. Even people who voted for Trump and might be thinking, I didn't think he would do that, or I didn't think this would go this far. This is going to test all of us to see, will we tolerate it? And because if you look at every single, if you look at the precursors to World War III, the Holocaust, the other World War, if you look at totalitarian
World War II, War II, not World War III. I haven't got there.
Jesus.
We're on
World War II. Oh my God. We're on the path of World War III. I was watching that series and it got me thinking of World War III, that turning point. And so I was thinking of the turning point to World War III. But if you look at the precursors to World War II, we're in the precursors to probably World War III if we don't switch things around. World War II, totalitarian governments, there's usually this type of thing where regular everyday people who don't pay attention to politics at all, literally, because regular people don't. Like there's studies about how people who don't work on it or don't watch the news, probably much less now with social media and everything, those are the people that get fooled and trapped into believing populists and totalitarians. They just are the ones that usually, because they don't have that sort of I want to say like media and political literacy to really discern things. They will say, oh, you're going to lower my price of eggs? Awesome. I've been paying a shit ton. I don't want that to happen. I don't want to be paying more, and I want you to lower it. And eventually there has to be a time where it's regular everyday people who say, I've had enough. And there are many, like we could do a whole podcast on how you can do that. Like there's whole articles about how Europeans during World War II showed little acts of resistance. And so I think if you're really worried about that and all of that, one, we can do an episode where we break that down and like have a total crazy episode and share resources, but like actually take it upon yourself to educate yourself on the history and maybe other places in the world, because I think this is something that the rest of the world has been wondering if it would happen in the US. You know, my mom has been saying today, I didn't think this would happen here. I didn't think this would happen here. And many people across the world that have suffered were wondering, would this ever happen? And I think Americans have to, even progressives and everyone, have to open up to how have other countries dealt with this and learn from other countries. I mean, we have an entire continent, starting from Mexico all the way down, that has had coups back and forth. As I said, many of them supported by the U.S., by the School of the Americas especially. And those people have been able to make it. And so I think really learning from them and understanding from them and knowing that it's hard work to do that. I mean, many countries to this day are still getting themselves out of fixing their systems and fixing their like in Argentina, for example. In my job, I pay attention a lot to Argentina and have learned a lot about it. They elected another Trump. But when it comes to the past, I mean, there's still people being tried to this day that perpetrated atrocities during their military dictatorship. I mean, it takes a long time for a country to recover from terrible, terrible things. And so I think we just need to, one, acknowledge that, and two, understand that you may have to adjust the way you live. And now that doesn't mean that you just should stop doing what you're doing and live in fear. No, it just means that, you know, if you have a totalitarian, changes might happen in your life. And two is figure out how active you will want to be. You can be minimally active or you can be super active, but like choose something, because ultimately it takes people coming together to actually resist, respond, and take these people down and fix things.
I think also, and I just want to acknowledge this for the listeners and folks at home, you know, even I, and I think I can say this for Maria too, but even I feel overwhelmed by this. And that's on purpose. They, again, going back to the shock and awe thing, they want us to feel demoralized. They want us to feel overwhelmed. They want us to feel scared. And I think it's an act of resistance just to be like, I'm going to show up every day and I'm going to take in what I can take in, and I'm going to do what I can. And then I'm going to stop for a minute and take care of myself. And I think that alone is an act of resistance. And we are going to have to take care of each other in this, because no one else is coming for us and nobody else is going to save us. We're going to have to save ourselves. And so I feel like that's kind of my takeaway from some of the work I did this weekend and some of the work that I've been doing is we're going to have to save ourselves here. And again, I think it's a great time to focus on the state government and what we can do to make Nevada a better place, because sometimes I think the state government is the only thing that's going to stand in the way of what happens at the federal level.
Truly, truly. And I think that is a good point, and that people should, you know, I heard from some strategists, and during a podcast a long time ago, that they said, you know, pick your lane and stay in it. That's sometimes the best thing to do is pick your lane and stay in it in trying times, because your lane is what you can control. It's what you know. And I think that's what, you know, it kind of evolves with that. If something is out of your lane and you don't want to deviate from your lane because it'll be too much, that's okay. Because ultimately the most important thing is surviving the whole thing, right? Like surviving beyond, you know, the next 4, hopefully that's it, years. And the other thing is also rest and take care of yourselves. Like you said, it is very important. My boss tells us rest is resistance. So it's important to, if you really feel like it and your body is telling you, your computer is telling you no, listen to it and say, no, I'm going to rest. And that is okay, because that fucker's still going to be there tomorrow, sadly.
Yep. And we're still going to have to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, this was depressing. Let's lighten the mood a little. What are our hot takes and headaches, Maria? Let's keep this thing moving and lighten the load a little bit. What's going on in your life? What's driving you crazy other than the federal government? What things are giving you headaches and wanting to make you have hot takes?
My hot take is, I don't know we're talking about Chipotle, and I don't know if other people have experienced this, but I ordered Chipotle the other day, and their guacamole was subpar this time. And I don't know if that's because
so gross.
And it was like even worse, and it didn't sit well. And I'm just like, well, okay. I don't know if they're starting to get avocados from somewhere else, but it was absolutely terrible and horrible. The other hot take I have is that I mentioned that I'm reading a book the other episode. I am halfway through it now. It's Onyx Storm. And for those of you that are reading it, you probably will feel me. 1, I am very scared to finish it. 2, because I feel like I'm going to need therapy just for the book and how that ends. And 3, I'm pissed that it is going to take too long for us to get the follow-up book. And so I'm just like, I don't know what I'm going to do with the things that will live in my head after finishing the book and not having.
Well, maybe you can catch up on some Housewives.
I knew you would say that.
Well,
What's your hot take and headache?
Hang on, before I get to hot takes, I do have to tell you something amazing that happened today in the building. Speaking of the Housewives, Alexis Hansen, Republican, friend. We don't always agree on everything. She came up and she's like, Annette, I don't have my pin right now, but we got to wear it again this session. Just for the record,
Yay!
So everybody knows, me and Alexis Hansen, Assemblywoman Alexis Hansen, have a Teresa Giudice table flipping pin. Maria got me mine. And Teresa Giudice is one of my favorites, even though she's crazy as hell. And so Alexis Hansen and I often wear it in the legislative building and do like pictures with it every session. So I'm excited to tell you that, Maria. That happened today.
That's amazing. We should totally have her on if she would ever be willing to come on to discuss.
She would.
And we can totally just discuss Housewives theories.
I think it would be good.
Chatting. Yeah, she can come on with her pin.
See? I think this is a new awakening for us, a new opening. We don't only have to interview Democrats and liberals. We can hear from the other side now, and I'm very excited to do that. I don't have to agree with them 100% on everything, but like, we should hear from the other side. I think it would be really good. What do our fans think out there? Folks who are listening, do you want to hear from the other side on everything from business to Housewives to whatever they want to talk about? Do you want to hear from, Republicans, conservatives, people who are maybe less liberal than me and Maria? What are your thoughts? What are your feelings? Put them in the chat. Let us know what you think.
Yeah, let us know. Who should we try to have on? What should we ask them?
What other guests are your dream guests? Tell us.
Did you ever want to find out what this Republican's favorite TV show was and just have them talk about it?
I think it would be good. Let's humanize people too. Why not? It can't all be doom and gloom, because boy, do we have enough of that. I think that's my hot take. We gotta spice it up a little bit and bring people on maybe we don't agree with to educate us more about what the other side is thinking.
Yeah.
It'll be fun.
Totally. And speaking of hot takes, there was one hot take. By the way, thank you everyone for liking, commenting, etc. But
keep going.
There was a comment that was my highlight, was someone, I'm sorry that I'm forgetting your username. I'll find it and we'll say it in the next one. But they had mentioned that we should do a behind the bar with cocktails. And I'm like, that's amazing. That's a great idea. And especially if we have legislators.
Oh my gosh. Could you imagine doing this with legislators with a cocktail? Now, I can't buy the cocktail because of the lobbyist laws that we were talking about earlier.
BYOB.
It could be a whole thing. What do you think, guys? Folks who are listening, what do y'all think? Thumbs up, thumbs down. You think it'd be fun? Let us know in the chat. Let's see. What are my other hot takes? Oh, the new cafe at the Legislative Building. For those who've never been to the Legislative Building, they got rid of the cafe a few years ago. It was a huge problem. My friend Marlene, our mentor Marlene, was furious. We were furious. They've redone the Legislative Building and they've put the cafe back in on the second floor at the front of the building, friends. And it is going to be life-changing. It is huge. There's places to sit. I feel like a freaking queen in that building now. Oh, now, of course, they did not fix the hose area that was going into the trash can where the water leak is on the second floor, which is just, I think, fitting for the Legislative Building. But the cafe is back, everyone. We can all rejoice. God bless Nevada.
That's right. Oh my God. Long live the cafe.
Let's see. I also, this past week, drove through rural Nevada. So did that. That was exciting. Got my new place in Carson City. Super excited. It's still a work in progress, but Nick was here all weekend. Got the couch together. Got the TV together.
Hey, Nick.
Woo! So super excited to show everyone that. You can follow me on social if you want to see my little house in Carson City. I'll give all the updates. And then, I'm excited to catch up on Bravo this week. I haven't been able to watch it because I've been getting my house ready in Carson City to live here for 4 months. So, there's a lot going on in my life. There's a lot of new stuff in my new role, owning my own business, being in the Legislative Building, all on my own, dealing with clients. So it's kind of like a new day. It's exciting. It's been an exciting few days for me, Maria.
That's amazing. Congrats. Yeah.
Thanks. It's been fun.
Woohoo.
For those who don't know, AM Solutions, that's my day job. That's my business. So you follow me on social media. I'll be doing stuff during session. And Maria and I are going to have a newsletter going out. So if you want to sign up for our newsletter, we'll put that link in the chat when we post our podcast. Sign up for our newsletter. We're going to be doing that, especially as we move through session and things keep going. If you want to hear from us weekly, sometimes daily, about what's going on during session, we're going to be doing that too. So we'll put the link for that in the chat.
Yeah,
Anything
totally. No, it was a long day today. It was a long Monday. News, session.
It's been a long life. It's going to be a long week. So, yeah. All right, let's move into Final Bell. So we'll bring this podcast for this week home. Maria, what are our key takeaways from today?
Yeah, I think the key takeaways are pay attention to the legislature. It's many times more impactful than the federal government nowadays can be impactful thanks to, Trump and Doge, because they're just hauling in there like bulls in a china shop. But the legislature can be extremely impactful in helping actually raise the price of eggs, lower the price of eggs, and raise the amount of eggs in the state, and in general just make life better when life isn't so great on the national level. And I think the other thing is to be aware just generally of what's going on in the world, but that it's okay to rest and just stay in your lane. That is also very powerful as well in these times.
Well, and I think too, just realizing not only does Nevada matter, but what happens in the U.S. affects the rest of the world, right? If we put tariffs on other countries, they are going to retaliate. And frankly, they should retaliate. And so, we cannot be putting tariffs on our biggest trading partners and expect them not to retaliate against us. And in my humble opinion, this was not a win for Donald Trump. It was a failure of Donald Trump to recognize and read the room. And we have to keep racking up these victories every time he fails. We have to point out that he is a failure and point out that his policies are failures, because even Republicans do not support tariffs. Even Republicans understand that this is a tax on the American people. And so we need to hold him accountable for this.
Absolutely.
And then finally, your voice matters. Stay engaged nationally, statewide. If you want to get engaged with us, share our podcast, like it, subscribe to it, tune in each week on Wednesdays. This is when we're going to have our podcast. We'll have special guests all through the legislature. We'll have special guests that are activists, people from our communities, people who are statewide legislators. We're super excited to bring a lot of different people to this podcast. So tune in each week, but make sure you're sharing, you're liking, you're subscribing. And then also subscribe to our newsletter, because there's going to be a lot more information that starts coming out. And we need your voice in this, and we want to educate people. And that's the whole point of doing this podcast. That's why we're here. So A huge thanks to Steve Sebelius for joining us today. He is one of our dear friends. We are so lucky that we got him. We'll have him again during session to explain all of his, all of the things that are going on during the Nevada Legislature. Also, if we say NVLEG, we mean the Nevada Legislature. So we'll bring him back, have his valuable insights. And of course, thank you to our listeners for spending your recess time with us.
Yeah, thank you, Annette. And shout out to all of our followers already that we have. Thank you so much. If you're not one of them, why not subscribe and like? And also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or Amazon Podcasts, we're on that one too. Subscribe there, but also rate and review the show and leave us comments. And also leave us comments, things you want to see in any of those spaces and social media. Follow us on social media.
Just questions. We want to hear from you.
Yeah, totally. And you can find all of our information and all of the links we talked about and our email if you want to email us, if that's how you prefer to communicate, in our beacons, which is like our website with all of the links that we have in every place that we're on. But thank you so much for listening. And Annette, you want to actually ring the bell and call us to recess?
Ding, 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 ding. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next Wednesday on 1 Minute Recess. Have a great evening or great week, everyone. Talk to you all soon. Thank you for joining us.